Hello, I'm Dr. Jenna Mikus of QUT School of Architecture and Built Environment in Brisbane, Australia. I recently completed my PhD in engineering and am a sessional academic and guest lecturer in design and business. I'm also the founder and managing principal of a health-based design consulting firm called UTA Group and sit on international advisory boards that specialize in ensuring health and equity in environments. My primary objective is to design for flourishing health and well-being. My research builds on 20 plus years of advisory work conducted with public and private clients around the world. I'm here to build on some of my recent work relating to a design approach that focuses on eudaimonic well-being, or doing what I call eudaimonic design in built and organizational environments, a subject I presented on in the December 2021 AMPS event entitled Environments by Design, Health, Well-being, and Place. In today's AMPS Applying Education talk and corresponding paper, I consider eudaimonic design in the context of health and well-being for PhD candidates, especially females, and propose an approach of empowering PhD candidates from within and externally in their supervisory teams and institutions through something I call PhD crafting. I'd like to begin by paying my respects to the First Nation owners of the lands upon which I work, teach, and study at QUT in Brisbane, Australia, the Turrbal and the Yagara people. I pay my respects to their elders, laws, and customs, and I recognize that the lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning, and that their lands were never ceded. A few years ago, I came across Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia. What exactly is eudaimonia? It literally means you, good or health, plus a daimon, true self, and is most commonly compared to words such as happiness or fulfillment, but is more than that. The word eudaimonia originated with Plato in the 4th century, but was developed most by his student Aristotle, who's pictured here. Aristotle considered eudaimonia to relate to human flourishing when people act as their best selves. And as I found from my research, when people are their best selves, they tend to not just be better, but do better. Recent research highlights the ability to design environments for aspects of physical, mental, and social health. Much of my work relates to exploring how spaces or conditions can be designed for eudaimonia as a means for improved health and happiness and for respectful design praxis, designing environments to prompt people to be those best selves. I have brought this concept to built and organizational environments as a new paradigm for health-based design, first when I created my consultancy and more recently in my academic research. While my PhD project explored how to design for eudaimonic well-being with and for older adults in the home, most of my work-related research and consulting relate to focusing on all demographics and the conditions in which they live, work, and play. Therefore, though this talk and paper build off of an approach of eudaimonic-focused design, this AMPS piece offers a more personally driven perspective on PhD candidacy, focusing on how eudaimonic design knowledge can be applied to foster healthier, happier PhD candidates throughout the inevitable ups and downs of candidacy. But first, I'd like to situate the problem in a dual environmental context. Over the past 3 years, we have felt the significant impact of COVID-19 on our lives and the importance of environments on our health and wellness. These include both spatial as well as organizational environments. According to researchers out of Harvard, buildings can make you sick or they can keep you well. And according to researchers in Canada and Oxford, organizational environments play an integral role in worker well-being, especially when considering post-pandemic circumstances. What if we consider designing environments for thriving health and overarching well-being from both a physical environment and organizational point of view? What would that look like in general and in a post-COVID reality? And what would that look like when considering student, specifically PhD candidates, and especially female PhD candidates, a demographic that has been impacted especially hard during the pandemic? Now for some problems or challenges. Problem or challenge number 1 is the university environment itself. Universities offer unique challenges for faculty, staff, and students, intermingling top-down bureaucracy with bottom-up workloads. Just as buildings can make us sick or keep us well, organizational environments, including those of universities, can certainly do the same. As this Guardian piece from 2019 attests, how universities are run directly relates to student anxiety and stress. Problem number 2 relates to the uniqueness of graduate students, especially PhD candidates as a demographic, even within an academic context, and the challenges that they face. Beginning since before the pandemic, back in 2018, both Gray and academic scholarship warned of the mental health crisis within graduate education. For example, the Nature Biotechnology paper shown on the right, that this Inside Higher Ed article on the left was based on, presented findings from a survey that included nearly 2,300 respondents, 90% of whom were PhD candidates. They were across 26 countries and 234 institutions. According to this study by Evans et al., 41% of these surveyed met moderate to severe anxiety levels, while 39% were within the moderate to severe depression range, a number particularly compelling when compared to the general population average of only 6%. Breaking these down by gender, transgender and gender nonconforming graduate students experienced the highest anxiety and depression of 55% and 57%. Among cis students, 43% of women experienced anxiety and 41% depression, compared to only 34 and 35% for men, respectively. What were some of the causes of this stress and strife in the form of anxiety and depression? Well, over half of the students with high anxiety and depression were believed to have unhealthy work-life balance, with similarly high numbers attributed to poor mentorship and lack of support, again marking the importance of organizational environmental factors. And the problems have seemingly been exacerbated as a result of the pandemic. As of 2021, the term PhD depression was used for the first time in this life sciences education publication by Jin et al. It cited studies like the UK-based one by Evans et al. From 2018 that was described as on the previous slide. And it underscored how, quote, graduate students are more than 6 times as likely to experience depression compared with the general population. However, the study differed in its conducting and its inductive analysis of qualitative interviews with 50 PhD students across 28 institutions. Findings included how research negatively affected depression while teaching improved it. Most importantly, it identified 4 overarching aspects that influence student depression, namely structure in teaching and research, positive and negative reinforcement, success and failure, and social support and isolation. By targeting these 4 areas, it might be possible to counteract PhD depression. Another challenge relates to burnout. We spend a third of our lives at work, and for PhD candidates who are deeply invested in their research, exploring personal passion, interest areas, while also often teaching and pursuing secondary jobs to pay for the bills, this percentage of time spent as work is believed to be even higher. This recent piece that came out from the Australian HR Institute last week highlights 3 types of burnout: overload, being overbooked, overscheduled, overcommitted; under-challenged, feeling understimulated or wasting potential; and neglect, feeling exhausted due to helplessness or agency loss. Each of these is a type of burnout many candidates have experienced. However, by improving environments, it's possible to ameliorate circumstances and avoid each of these burnout types. As organizational psychologist Dr. John Chan states, if we see a fish dying in the river, we don't think about how we make the fish stronger. We ask how we can clean up the pollution and fix its environment. And while that has validity, perhaps it's possible to provide such support both from the outside and from within, encouraging the environment to be better, but then also encouraging the fish to be stronger as well. Having a multi-pronged approach is especially important when considering how best to improve environments for female PhD candidates, whose circumstances were significantly exacerbated post-COVID. For example, we consider unrealistic expectations of academic life. In a visual by Dr. Susan Vardell, whose handle is @unlazysusan, which says it all, she represents the multifaceted teaching, research, and service academic requirements of a lecturer based in New Zealand. Wardell's PhD was on burnout, and though the graphic is not meant to directly relate to her research, it certainly intimates at potential causes for burnout in academia. Indeed, when looking at this visual, it's hard to believe that all of these duties can be addressed in the same job description and by only one person. And although this visual is meant to depict responsibilities of an established lecturer academic, it hints at similar burdens taken on by PhD candidates training for such a role, while also navigating the constant struggle for pivoting or perishing to prove that their ideas have merit. These expectations on their own can prove tiring. However, when they are combined with caretaking demands of home life, demands that are often associated with and taken on by females, they can certainly take their toll. It's no surprise that women continue to be the most burdened by the heavy toll of pandemic-caused disruption and the shifting ways of the new normal, as identified in this Deloitte Women at Work 2022, a Global Outlook report. Therefore, it's unsurprising that they are alarmingly high levels of burnout in this group. Next, we consider the uneven expectations of home life post-COVID. According to a persona study comparing how people spend their time in 2020 post-pandemic versus the 2019 pre-pandemic, it's clear how much more women were impacted by COVID-19 when considering their home lives and work-life balance needs. Considering housework, both men and women spent more time on housework, though women spent more hours total and represented a larger percentage of the population engaged in the activity, more than twice that of men at 48% rather than only 21%. For food preparation and cleanup, though both men and women increased time spent on the activities, women again shouldered more of the burden, with 72% doing such activities compared to only 47% of men. Caretaking responsibilities increased for both overall, with more women engaging in caretaking activities overall than men. According to the Policy Equity Group, it is of the utmost importance that these Wonder Women be recognized for what they offer, highlighting the invisible and valuable work of mothers and caregivers. Some academics believe that remote work has the potential to level the playing field for work-life balance. In a piece for Greater Good magazine, a science-based publication affiliated with the University of Berkeley that extols the value of well-being-focused design, Shelley Carell, a professor of sociology at Stanford, shares how this post-pandemic hybrid nature of work could mark a, quote, watershed moment for employees, particularly those who have long carried the burden of balancing caregiving with their careers. It marks an opportunity to reduce stress and burnout, thereby increasing gender equity and inclusion. But we must be intentional in how we design these policies, or we risk importing old biases and barriers into our new hybrid work arrangements, end quote. And it's even more important that these hybrid environments are designed equitably, given how many others are working to countermand women's accomplishments. Tall poppy syndrome is known as the phenomenon when high-performing women, such as PhD candidates, are cut down rather than recognized for achievement. Billen and Humber's 2018 report and Billen's 2023 report are juxtaposed here, characterizing the pervasiveness of this international phenomenon, which has been quantified as impacting approximately 87% of respondents, both then in 2018 and now. According to these findings, not much has improved. One thing that's changed moderately is who is doing the cutting of these poppies. In 2018, it was believed that jealous women were primarily to blame. However, the blame has now shifted to envious men. No matter who is at fault, women can thrive at work if they're in environments that cultivate their well-being. One approach that's been offered as a means of addressing concerns is a positive-focused approach. However, it's important to recognize that there's a significant difference between designing legitimately for positive psychology, also now known as well-being science, and having a superficial and therefore detrimental impact via a toxic positivity approach. To explain this difference further, especially for those unfamiliar with the terminology, I'd like to cite this casual yet important piece published by WorkLife in January. In it, they define toxic positivity as, quote, the belief that people should maintain a positive mindset no matter how dire or difficult a situation, end quote. While people's motivations might vary in degree of sincerity, this sort of positivity is often shared in the workplace as an obligatory recognition of personal tribulation, saying cliched phrases, acting like a cheerleader, or dismissing feelings. As Mita Milik, a head of inclusion, equity, and impact at Carta states, when you show up with toxic positivity, you are not hearing, seeing, or understanding the situation. It can serve as a slippery slope that often leads to gaslighting, invalidating human experience with the potential of leading to trauma, isolation, or unhealthy coping mechanisms. As Ann Moss Rogers, a mental health and suicide prevention speaker, continues, quote, toxic positivity ruins how we listen. We need to listen with more empathy so we don't glaze over their sadness. Consider a PhD candidate who is already vulnerable to loneliness, self-consciousness, and PhD depression. Many are eager for validation of their work and their ideas. If supervisors and universities miss the opportunity to legitimately recognize PhD candidates' human needs, it can be damaging, quote, ruining the psychological trust and safety in the workplace, according to Malik. Candidate environments should instead cultivate belonging and enabling people to show up as their whole selves, both on good and bad days, while also ensuring they feel competent and experience agency in their work. One way that these requirements can be accomplished is via eudaimonic design, designing for our best selves. In my research that involved establishing eudaimonic design as a means of curating environments for flourishing health and well-being, it was recognized that the design done for self-determination theory, as well as the idealized notion of eudaimonia, resulted in environments that were considered flourishing, supportive, as well as individually empowering, thus aligning with anti-burnout design suggestions, as well as empowering positive psychology ideals that support motivation, performance for impact, and even trust. And this correlates to a 2020 University of Helsinki study that was reviewed just last week, upholding how as many as 60% of students feel they are burnt out or at risk of burning out. According to the study, factors that are attributed to nearly 46% of the burnout reported relate to the three basic psychological needs associated with self-determination theory: autonomy, competence, and relatedness or belonging. This theory of SDT has not only been proposed as a means of counteracting burnout, but also to accomplish what Ryan et al. Call, quote, living well, again, aligning with Aristotle's eudaimonia, or being one's flourishing best self. This research takes on a problematized approach to this complex subject matter. So how can doctoral environments be curated to support optimal health and well-being of female PhD candidates? Here I position my research problem by identifying a few design shortcomings and corresponding aims. The first relates to the what, designing for comprehensive elements of health and well-being, rather than only designing for aspects of health, as has been done in the past. While health-based design is helpful, well-being-focused design provides the potential to not just improve elements of physical, mental, and social health individually, but collectively, while also contributing to better life experiences. The second shortcoming relates to the why, all to connect theory with practice, something that rarely happens, especially in architectural and organizational design. There is a deep need to connect theory with practice, both to allow historical and current research to inform practice, and to close the feedback loop and allow practice to share real-world thoughts with theory-based researchers. There's much to be learned on both sides, and if these sides could be bridged, it may be possible to derive theory-based design principles that are both innovative and pragmatic. The third shortcoming builds on the theory with practice why and questions the how. In the past, the how of environmental design has revolved around math and science rather than psychology or philosophy. Some of the big problems facing PhD candidates today involve existential questions of self and purpose, examining why one does what they do, unearthing a Simon Sinek-like vision of finding their personal why, and determining how best to work toward that without being waylaid by feelings of depression, anxiety, or burnout, or even gender-based inequities such as tall poppy syndrome. Qualitative studies that explore psychology-based approaches for philosophy-based design can provide tremendous insight into environments that make us feel happy, healthy, and empowered. That's really what positive psychology is all about, and if you remember how eudaimonia is defined. This proposed approach originates both in scholarship as well as some of my PhD research. From a scholarship point of view, I reference two key publications, which I lead authored, that served as the initial hypothesis of the research. The first was this AMS publication from 2021. In it, we cite how SDT had been positioned as a positive psychology-based means of designing for eudaimonia in the past. And we proposed how, building on scholarship, it might serve as a means to design for comprehensive health and well-being as well. Therefore, by designing for SDT's competence, autonomy, and relatedness on the inner circle, physical, mental, and social health could comprehensively benefit. Since then, we have proposed this as an approach to design for not only individual worker health and well-being, but also workspace and workplace health and well-being as well, as shown in this IGI book chapter from 2022. In that chapter, we considered self-determination theory in the context of accepted certification models of architectural and organizational wellness, as shown here. From this exercise, we found that our approach based on self-determination theory satisfies areas of architectural wellness when considering Harvard's 9 foundations of a healthy building, as well as organizational wellness, comparing it to WELCOA's elements of wellness criteria. Thus, the approach aligns with all areas of the models, offering a sound approach for meeting such dual environment, architectural and organizational wellness criteria. When considering our model, as I mentioned before, it not only has applicability across COVID areas and workplace models, but it also has applicability across a variety of workplace conditions, from job type to time of day and to location. It considers a variety of office mates, be they flora, fauna, or human. And most importantly, it allows for a variety of personal circumstances across the Royal College of Art Helen Hamlin Center's 4 axes of inclusive design, including age, race, gender, and ability. Thus, it can serve as an equitable design approach, all because of self-determination theory. This scholarship was then elaborated on in my PhD study. In it, I spent 2021 in close engagement with older adults across Australia, focusing on co-designing for eudaimonic well-being at home. The study included a creative methods-based approach that involved one-on-one interviews and creative probes of design futuring activities that were sent to participants' homes, exploring their home experiences of the past and the present, as well as their desired experiences for the future. The feedback on the creative methods-focused design and its impact on their lives was incredibly positive. Participants found the processes to be genuinely interesting, quote unquote, and they felt more satisfied and motivated to improve their environments and themselves. Unintentional consequences of the study. The approach was found to prompt desires for personal change, resulting in participants tidying up spaces, adding plants for biophilia, and wishing to explore and go out on trips. Therefore, as stated in a 2021 Lancet publication that I did, quote, usage of this approach is proposed not only to address optimal physical, mental, and social needs proactively, but also to encourage occupants to be their intrinsically motivated best selves. One way this could be interpreted is as a form of empowered crafting. Crafting is a term that originated with Amy Rijnewski of Yale. It involves curating one's role into something that they enjoy. The concept has primarily been explored in the context of work being cited in well-being science scholarship, such as the blog of Professor Laurie Santos, also of Yale. And given work-from-home tendencies, it's been explored as home crafting, but again in a more work-from-home context. Knowing of this crafting scholarship and remembering the unexpected impact of the PhD research, it was recognized that eudaimonic design could serve as an approach for both crafting environments for health and, borrowing from job and life crafting scholarship, home crafting, empowering occupants to shape their homes into places in which they can thrive. That is, considering eudaimonic design, or ED, as praxis. According to Demarudi et al. In 2020, home crafting involves, quote, changes that occupants make to balance their home demands and home resources with their personal abilities and needs in order to experience meaning and create or restore their person-to-environment fit, end quote. Or as Bauer and Shorey put it, quote, when people are empowered to proactively shape their meaningful roles in life, end quote. Because my thesis was explored with and for older adults via co-design, accounting for lived experience at all ages, and with 25% of the participants having been PhD candidates themselves, Design for All theory attests to how this eudaimonic design research that resulted in empowering home crafting might have validity and similar impact when applied for other demographics. By similar logic, eudaimonia-focused design can likely be applied to improve PhD candidate environments, while also motivating the candidates themselves to curate conditions in which that they can thrive. As mentioned before with the dying fish analogy, we are not looking to put onus on the dying fish, or in this case, the burnt-out PhD candidate. We wish to improve their environments. However, if we can improve their environments while also empowering the fish to become more motivated and wish to improve their surroundings themselves, wouldn't that result in better outcomes? Therefore, similar to the visual that was presented in the Workplace Wellness book chapter, PhD crafting could enable an outside-in and an inside-out symbiotic approach to benefiting candidates, this time viewing the PhD candidates on the inside, supported by the research team, and ultimately the university on the outside. In conclusion, the primary significance and contribution of this paper involves proposing eudaimonic design to promote PhD crafting as a means of combating tall poppy syndrome and supporting female PhD candidates. By designing physical and organizational environments for SDT's competence, autonomy, and relatedness with eudaimonia in mind, candidates are likely to experience the support they need from their teams and their universities, while also feeling individual motivation, legitimate trust with team members, including supervisors, and purpose-driven impact to better their own lives and the well-being of their universities. Doing so can have tremendous benefit and improve the lives of these women, enabling them to be their best, healthy, and productive selves. Thank you for your time and attention.